Hi and welcome back to the next video. In this video we are looking at our project real-time live chat application with Nest.js and Angular, and we made like some changes to the structuring. So now we are using also GitHub releases to release versions of it, and here you are looking at version 1.0.1, and you can always on the GitHub project page there's like a tab releases, and there you can see all the releases. So the next one would be 0.2.0 and so on until we can release a version 1.0 where we fixed nearly all the bugs and added some main features. Like the main technologies you can see here are Docker, Nest.js, Angular, Socket.io of course, and in the bottom right corner you can see like a little screenshot from the application. So on the left you have all your rooms, you can create also another room, and on the right you have selected one room where you can see like the messages that other users and yourself wrote. So let's go to the table of contents. First, we are looking at the first chapter of the project summary. So we take a little bit high-level view of the project. We look at also the running project in version 0.1.0, and we look at what this project is aiming for, and we look at the Docker Compose and Dockerfiles so that you can easily start the project with just one command if you have Docker installed. In the second chapter, we look at the front end, so we look at the Angular code structure, we go through the code and the use of Socket.io, and first we can make a little bit high-level view, and then we go more into detail. Then, in the third chapter, we go to our Nest.js backend, we look at our code structure, we also go through the code and Socket.io, or our Websockets that we are using there, and we look with a high-level view at the code base and then more detailed. When we have finished all this main stuff, we have a quick look at the next step. So these are some ideas that I would like to implement like in the next versions, for example, make some bug fixes or add some functionality. So let's have a look at our first chapter. Here we want to have like a high-level view of the project. We want to look at the running project in version 0.1.0, and we want to look what this project is aiming for. So here we have visual code, and we can also go to our GitHub repository. So this is like public, you can always have a look at it. And here we say we have built here like a real-time live chat application, and our backend, so our API is made with Nest.js, and our frontend is made with Angular, and these are connected by normal HTTP requests. And we also rely on Socket.io in version 4, so the latest version, to have like real-time messaging between people or in chat rooms. So it means as soon as we send like a message, then the other person receives it at this moment. So it's like a bidirectional connection. This is like JWT secured. So you always have like authentication with your JWT in the backend, so that we can make sure that the message you send is, or that you receive, is always from the user that it says there. You can register a user, you can log in, we can create or we can manage private chat rooms, we can add users to these rooms, we can also write messages and we receive them in real time and so on. Here we have like the basic README, so we have a link to GitHub, to all commits on GitHub, to our YouTube playlist, and my Twitter link. And here the first 17 videos where I implemented this, you can see it here. There the commits are prefixed with the video number, what we made there. And so you can always look up the video if you're interested in what has been done there. But then you always have to go back here to the specific commit, because of course the repository changes. And here you can see the latest changes were made just the last weeks, where you updated as well as Nest.js, as well as Angular, so like all dependencies to the most recent versions that are working here. Support would be nice, either if you follow on GitHub, on YouTube, if you sponsor something, would be great, or you can just like look the videos. Here are some basic facts for this project. So we have built the API with the latest version of Nest.js, so version 8, and also the latest version of Socket.io. We are using Angular in version 12 and also Angular Material. I will update this later to version 13, but we now have like a dependency that relies on version 12, so we have to wait for an update there. here you can start everything now just with Docker Compose up. So you need Docker on your computer, and then it's very easy to run because then we have like a database set up there as a service and so on. So you just need to type this, and then you have like the complete service running. And we'll have a look later how this is working. Yeah, you can see it here, like the first 17 videos are matched or are prefixed with the video number. You can have a look at the user stories for the first 17 videos. And then there's like a to-do file with some ideas that could be implemented in the next time. So these are like some ideas that we can implement like in the next versions of this repository or of this project. So we have like here the main features, like I said, register user, log in, get a valid JWT token for authentication with API and the WebSocket or socket.io. We can create a chat room and add users by the username. We can join the chat rooms and see the latest messages. We can write a message, and this will be like emitted immediately to all other turned users for this room that are online now. So here are some commands how to run the project. So you can use Docker Compose up, and then everything is fine. If you are like developing, then maybe sometimes you need to delete some containers or images. So here are some commands, I think for Windows, that you can use. So you don't have to look them up. We now can have like a basic look at the JWT. So here's some basic stuff about JWT. So this is like the official site from JWT.io. So JWTs are like an open standard, and it's used for securely transmitting information between two parties as a JSON object. And this is like strictly signed. So we can use this for authorization. And it has like a structure with a header, a payload, and a signature. So it's something like this. So you can see it here. So this is the first part. Then we have the second part, which is the body. So you can give it here, like for example, the roles or the chat rooms, whatever you need, or the email. You need everything here, and then the signature. So like in the header, we have two parts, so the algorithm and the type. In our payload, also in our body, we can add everything that we need. So for example, the email, the user ID, the chat room, so whatever we want, we can add there many. So we will have a look later what we added here, and then the signature. Yeah. So this is used to verify that the message wasn't changed, and so this verifies that the JWT is not touched. So if you would change like a little bit here anywhere, then you see we have like an invalid signature. So the whole would look like this, like we see it here. And you can have a quick look at Socket.io. So here, Socket.io was created in 2010, and it was developed to use open connections to facilitate real-time communication. So because if we are just using like HTTP, we are like always like pulling, and we cannot really push data to a client. So for example, if two users are connected and they are just making like a pull request, then they need to like press F5 to receive like the new messages to pull again from the server. But if we have like Socket.io, we have like a bidirectional communication between our client and the server, so that also the server can push like a message to the client. So for example, the user A is typing or sending a message to the server, and then the server knows, this message was posted to this chat room here, and then in this chat room is not just user A, but also user B, and then it sends this message also to user B about it, with a bidirectional connection, this time with Socket.io. And then this user receives it directly. So you can see it here. So first, Socket.io creates like a long polling connection using XHR polling, and then when it's established, it upgrades to like the best connection method available. This will be in most cases WebSocket connection, and then we have like our connection which is bidirectional, and then we can automatically, you can see when client 1 sends a message, it's message back, and the server also sends it to client 3 and to client 2 and 3. So here are some examples, I think with Express, but we can now switch to our code base. Get first a high-level overview and look at the Docker file and Docker compose file, and then we are going in the next 2 chapters have a detailed look at the code in our frontend in our API. So you can see it here. Like this are the user stories for the first 17 videos. GitHub is just my funding file. Then we have our API folder where we have our nest.js stuff, and we have our frontend folder with our Angular stuff. Then we have our README that we just went through in our on GitHub, and we have our to-dos that are some ideas for coming in the next versions. So here we have our Docker compose file, and before I now run it, we just can go quickly over it. So there's like the version 3.8 of Dockerfile or Docker compose file, and we have here some services. So we have our API service. This is our nest.js API, and here we are building from our Docker file in our API folder. So here we have our Docker file for nest.js, and this just simply here makes a directory inside our container. We copy the package JSON, we run npm install to have all our dependencies, and then we just start it, and we expose like port 3000, and you can see it here in our package JSON. And we hit run. We start like just nest, and here this should be all for this. And then we can see it here. We have like attached a volume for our node modules. So we mount our host directory to the Docker container so that we can reflect file changes from here to our container directly. So if you change anything here, then Docker will pick this up and also like restart services. We can start it here either in dev mode or in debug mode. For example, at the moment we are starting in debug mode. You can also change this to another mode. And here in debug mode we are binding it to port 9229. But you can do it like you want. The service depends on our Postgres, so this is our Postgres service here. This is just an image of our Postgres database, and there we have a user, password, and a DB, and we have some port mapping so that nest.js can connect to this database. And here we have some environment variables for nest.js, so the database URL, the node env, JWT secret, and the port. So this here is like the link how to connect against to our Postgres database, so user, password, and the DB. So these are like the stuff that we have here. So we are able to connect to the database, and then we have some port mapping 3000 to 3000 and 9229 for like running the debug mode if we want to. Yeah, then we have like our front end. This is also running the Docker file in our front end folder. We run npm run start. We have also attached the volumes, and we have some port mapping, and we are linking it to our API here, to our nest.js backend. And this Docker file is also very simple. So we need Node in version 14. We have our working directory. We copy also the package JSON to have all the dependencies here installed. We also install the Angular CLI, and then we we run npm run build, and we expose port 4200, which is the basic port for Angular. This is like our Postgres database here. And then we have like a Postgres app miner. So if you would like to, you could go to like video 1, for example, where we set this all up here and have a look how we handle this. But basically, if you run Docker compose now, this will also spin up Postgres admin. And with this, you're able to connect to this database and run some SQL stuff if you want to. So now we have talked enough. We can just start the service. So now I'm in my folder here, and I can just say docker compose up. And now you can see I had some containers created. Now we have here our Postgres database. We have the Postgres adminer. We have our API, our front end, and now all is starting up. And this will need some time. Here you can see our API is starting in watch mode, I think because of the debug. And our front end is also generating all the application bundles. So we just need to wait a little bit of time. And just a reminder, if you are doing this the first time, then it will need like a lot more time because it's downloading all the images. For example, for the Postgres database, which I already have downloaded on my computer to make it a little bit faster now for you. So here you can see all the logs from our nest.js backend. So you can see we have initialized all our modules, our gateway, so this is like our socket.io, has subscribed to the messages, create room, paginate rooms, join room, leave room, and add message. So these are like the stuff that we are using with socket.io. And we have also some basic HTTP controllers. And now here our frontend is also bundling up and should be now available. So here we have now our local host running, and we have like our login page. And I already registered like 3 or 4 users, I think, but we can now register a new user because if you run it the first time, you also need to register like the first users so that you can log in and, for example, open like a chat room. So when we go to register, I can say, for example, let's say example.com. Our username could be example. Our password could be password1. Then we can register. Then we have created the user successfully. And we can say example@example.com for login. And when we type the wrong password, then we are not being logged in. But if we type the correct password, then we should be logged in, so we are successful. And at the moment, we have no chat rooms. And we have no chat room selected. So for example, I could create a new room. And I could name it example description. And then I can search users by username. For example, I think I already have created like a Thomas user. And add this user here. Could also remove this. I think I have an Oliver user. Maybe, or maybe not. No, but I think I have a test user. Add this. And then create the chat room. And now I have a name, or chat room with the name example here. And with a description, I can see the names of the users that are in it when it was created. For example, if I now log in, I think with another user, could be, I think, Thomas. If I remember correctly, let's find out. Yes, and you can see I have here also like our example chat room and another chat room that I use for the YouTube picture. Here we have now this exact room. So if I type here something, hi, I am example, and this should show up here immediately. And you can see it here. Now this is my own message, so it's in blue, and here it's from example, where I'm Thomas, and this is gray. So here I can now say, hi, example, I am Thomas. And then you see it here, this is like mine, so this is blue, and here it's like gray because it's like the other user. So this is basically the whole functionality. You can have like multiple chat rooms with different users, and you will always just see your own rooms. You can add messages. You have like some scrolling. You have here like pagination. So these are all some stuff that we can make like nicer in the next versions. So now, since we are talking like about versions, so now we can finish like, so this is like the basic stuff about Docker-compose. And since I managed or talked about like versions, so here, like in 2022, we have here the pre-release in v0.1.0 alpha. So this is like the first pre-release now. So we have like implemented like the basic features that are listed here. But since there are some bugs and features missing, we will always like publish like a new version. Here should also be linked like the YouTube video accordingly. So when this video here gets released, I will add this to this description here from the release, and then this is connected, and then there will be like the next release, which maybe has just some bug fixes, then maybe next release where we have maybe that he cannot just add users well with the creation of a chat room, but also later, or remove users and so on, so that we can have some more stuff. And this is like all nicely organized and connected. So now we are coming like to chapter 2, so the front end. So here we want to have a look at our Angular code structure. We want to go through the Angular code and the use of socket.io, and we have first like a little bit high-level view of the code base, and then we want to go detail to everything in the code. So here you can see we have our front-end folder with Angular, not modules of course, and in the Angular JSON or in the package JSON, all our dependencies. So you can see here we are at the moment at version 12 from Angular. Yes. Then we have here our Docker file that we already looked at in chapter 1. And we can go into our source folder, and here we have proxy conf file that we need to go with Docker, because we need here to go against our API service of the nest.js service, and for the API request and for our socket.io requests also. Then we have like a structure. We have like some guards. We have our models here, so our interfaces. Then we have like a private module that contains like all the stuff that is like behind the login mask on our application. And we have a public module where we have all the stuff or all the routes that you can use without logging in. So for example, in and the register route and components. Then we have like a test service. I think this has, this was just a test purpose. So now let's look a little bit deeper in the code, and let's start from the top. So we have our app module here. We are just importing some basic modules, and in our routing module we have some lazy loading for the path private and for the path public, and here we are loading the private module, and here we are loading the public module. So we can now start first with the public module, and here you can see we have just two routes, the login and the register route, the login component and the register component. First, we have a look at the login component. So here, this is like very basic. We have a link to our register. So you can go to the register route if you hit this link here. And then we have just a basic Angular form and a reactive form with two input fields or meta form fields. The first one takes something of type, takes a type email, with placeholder email and form control name email. And if it is touched and has error required, then it will display the error email is required, and the same goes for email, that the email must be valid. And then we also have like for password field, the placeholder password and the form control name password. So this form control name password here and this form control name email here connects to our form in our component. In this case, then to the email or the form property, password property. And then we have like here in that hint, and if the form is like not valid, then we display like a hint that you should fill out everything or all needed information. And then if it is valid, you can hit login, and if the form is like not valid, then this button is disabled. So when we go through our code here, you can see we have our Angular form with two validators, or the email with two validators. Once it's required, so we always need an email and a provided password, both are required. And the email also needs to validate like against an email. So this tests like the value of a regular expression. If it is a valid email. Then if you hit like login, the button, when you have filled everything out, then we are going against our authentication service and provide our email and password values. And if this is correct, then we navigate to our private route to our dashboard. So then we would be like in our private module. So we can go to our authentication service. The login is just observable, so like a post request against our backend. And then we get like a response. In our local storage, we set the item, the access token that we need, so that we can later like add this token to all our requests against the backend. So this is the JWT token. And we also display like the snack bar with Angular material, like a hint that our login was successful. So at the top right corner here for 2 seconds, so 2000 milliseconds. And with this here, with this function, we get the logged in user. So we have here our JWT service. We get the decoded token, and then we just return the user from this. So when we go here to our front end and go to our developer tools, now you see this here is in German. But in our local storage, you can see we have our nest.js chat app, and here we have our JWT token, and we can just pass it in here, and then you see the header, the payload, and the signature, and then as payload we have our user with ID 5, username, and the email, and then it was issued and then it was expired. So with this, well, we are adding this JWT token then to all the requests against our backend to make sure that we are the user who we say we are. So this is the login, and then we have our register component where we have basically the same structure. We have a link to the login page so that you can switch between these two components or routes. We have our form, and this has here not just email and password, but email, username, password, and the password confirmation. And we always like display an error if, for example, it was touched and it has an error, required or email, or here required. So this goes basically the same for email, username, password, and password confirmation. And we can just hit, or we can only hit the button if the form is valid. So here we have like a little speciality because we have a password and a password confirm. And we want to always make sure that these are like the same, having the same value. So we have like here a custom validator that I named passwords matching. So here we get a basic, or we get an abstract control from our form in this case, and we get the password and the password confirm to both values, and then we check are they matching, then we are adding null, so we do nothing. But if they are not matching, then we add like a validation error, passwords not matching true to it, and then we would display, for example, here, if our form has the error passwords not matching, then we would display like the hint passwords are not matching. This is like very easy so that the user always gets a feedback if this provided password or both passwords are correct and matching. So from the structure we have here in our public module the helpers. So this is the password matching custom validators. We have our two components, and we have our authentication service, login, and we have the user service where we register, and this is in our register component. And we hit register, then we use our user service to create a user, and we have here our email, password, and username values. This is just our observable request or our post request against the backend, against our API users route with the user we want to create. So this is our user interface here. This is from our model folder with an ID. This is optional, email, username, password. So this ID would be created from the backend then. And then when it was created, we display like a snack bar on the top right that it was created successfully. And if not, then we say could not be created. We throw the error. So now if we make everything correctly and we log in, then we would land in our private module. And here you can see we have our dashboard component and our create room component. And maybe we can see something else. We can see it here, our private module here. So we are now in the app routing module. We have here our private module is protected by an authentication guard. So this is here in our guards folder. We have a guard that checks with our JWT service, which is like coming from this out over Angular JWT package. So you can check is the token expired, or other words, if you're having, and this will return like true if the token is expired, or also if it's not finding like the correct token, and then it would navigate back and return false. So you could never go to the private route. So you always need like a valid JWT token to hit this route here. And here we have like our dashboard and our create room component and all our dependencies or all our components and modules that we need here. So the first is maybe our WebSocket. So we have here our socket.io connection interface. I just had to extend it because at the moment I'm also like every socket.io message that I send to the backend. Here I provide in the extra headers, you can see it here, the JWT token with our token getter here, where we just get like our token from our local storage, and then we add this to every socket.io request. And since this is at the moment not implemented with this package here, I think this is coming like in one of the next versions, but it's not released at the moment. So I just extended like the interface so that we can add this token here for authorization, and then we can check in the backend is this correct. Then we have here like components and services. Let's start with the components. Maybe have a look. Yeah. So we are at the custom socket, and then we can go to our components. So we have like the first would be like our dashboard. So here we have on the left our chat rooms, where we say first that we are logged in our username, and for example when we want to create a new room, how to link it to a route, and then we have a met selection list where we display like all the rooms with their name and their ID. And then we have here like the Angular pagination. And then on the right in the div, we have our app chat room component, where we display like the selected room at the moment. We can see, I think this should be this. So let's first, so basically this is like split. We have here one div at the left where we display the rooms. You can see it here. So this is basically our left side where we have our rooms, and on the right we have the room that we have selected at the moment displayed, like for example in WhatsApp Web. So this is the left side, and this here is the right side where we display our selected room. And this happens in our component. We get from our chat service all our rooms for my user that I'm logged in, and this is simple. I subscribe, I listen to event rooms from the socket.io, and there I get all the rooms. Then the selected room is initially null, so if I didn't select any room, and this is my user from our authentication service, where we get the user. As you remember, this is our decoded token, and then the user from the payload. So on ng.init, so if we come to this component, we emit paginate rooms, and this is like the first So we limit our request with the first, and we want also the first page. So we load our rooms. When we select the room, then we get the selected value from our event. So if we click in our list here on select room on a list, on a room here, then we select it. And then we set our selected room property here to this room. And then we paginate, then we give our event also the page size and the page index that we want to have so that we can paginate it. So if we would now, like here, select the room, then you see in our HTML that our chat room component here get then like the input for our selected room. So this is here our component. You can see it here. Our input is our chat room. And then we have like a scroller for the messages and our messages paginate, where we get like the messages from our chat service. And then we pipe these. And we check. And then we just like, for example, order them in the correct order so that then they are displayed in the connect or in the right order. And then we return our paginate messages. And if this is done, we also scroll always to the bottom so that we have like the latest messages displayed. So here we can have a look. This is our chat message. So this is our form if we want to add like a new message. So this is like here the bottom. Now you have just like an input. So this is just our input, our form, and we want to add here like a new message. And this is some basic CSS, some basic HTML. Then we send message. We are hitting here to send message. And then we have like the text and the room. So we always want to add, to send a message to room. And this is like here in our chat service from socket.io. We emit a message to our backend. And this message is a message interface where we have like our message. So the text, the user, the room. And then these are here created, update at ID will be generated by the backend. And we also, so then we always save like in our backend the message and the room. And then in our chat room, we also display here our chat room name. So this is like our top stuff here from our chat room. So the title, the date, the description, the users that are in it. So this is the top here where we just have the chat room.description, the chat room.users, and here we iterate over them and just display them. So this is also like to do for one of the next videos, I think. Here we have like the messages, so we loop over all the messages that we have, and then we display it with our app chat message component. And this is just a small span that displays it and adds an ng class if it's the same user or not. So if we wrote it or not, and this just checks if the message or the user ID in the message is the same as our user ID. And this loads the user ID from our authentication service again, which gets it from the local storage. So here in our chat room, then we have just the add message that we already looked at. So this is like very basic, and we scroll to bottom. Here we are just scrolling to the bottom. We have a message scroller here. So that if there are like many messages, we always scroll to the bottom. Then the last thing that you can do is, if you're on the dashboard, you can also create a room. This is very simple. It's a own room. You can always navigate back to the dashboard. And here we have again a form group with name, description, and where we can add some users. So we can go into our component. We have our form with name, description, and the users, which is just form array. When we are creating, we like emit message. So with our form, and then we navigate to our back to our dashboard. And you can see it here. We can also select the users that should be present in the chat room. And here we get like an event. So if our select users, we have like an output. So if we select here, so we have here like a search field and that autocomplete field where we can search for the username. You can see it here. We have that autocomplete. So, and we can say, let's have a quick look where we are. So, search username. So we have here our search username. This is the basic form control. And if the value changes, so if we type something, then we wait for like 0.5 seconds. And when it changed, then we send a request against our backend to find the user by username. And if we find, or if we get something back, then we set our filtered users here, which is at the moment an empty array, to the users that we got back from the backend. And then you can select them. And if you want to select them, you have to hit like our button here, add user to form, which is a click event. Then we add the user to form here. And here we emit like an event or an output. Here we add user to our create room component. You can see it here. And then we would first init a user. So we make a new form control with ID, username, and email. And then we make add user. So we push the created user here. So we init user to our users here, to our form array, so that when we later save or want to create our room, then we have all our users in there. And also this goes like the same here if you want to remove a user. So when we have here our metric list for the added users, and if we want to remove a user, then we are also here emitting our output here, remove user, like we emit an event. And this is also be catched here in our create room. When remove user is emitted, we are removing the user by the user ID that is emitted, and remove it from the array. So we find it by the index, and then we just remove it. And yeah, everything is fine when you hit like the create button in the form, and then we are creating a room where we just like emit our message to our backend, create room with the room parameters or the room property. And then we just display the snack bar that the room was created. So this is basically our whole front end. So now we are in chapter number 3, the backend part. So let's look at the nest.js code structure. Let's go through the code and then the use also of socket.io. And then we want to also have a look first high level and then low level at the code. So here we have our API folder. So this is like our nest.js stuff. So our backend part. We have our basic Docker file that we already looked at, and our package.json with all our dependencies that we are using. And here we have like used nest.js in version number 8. And here we have our source folder. So this is divided into 4 modules. Our authentication module. This is there for handling all the JWT stuff and have some guards. Our chat module where we have our socket.io gateway here, or our WebSocket gateway in this case. We have a little middleware, so this is like just a simple class. And we have our user module where we handle all the user stuff. So let's look deeper in it. So first we can start at the top level. We have our app module where we are importing our configuration module, our type-orm module, and here we are using the .env or our environment variables that we specified in the docker-compose file at the highest level here. You can see it here. For our API, we have database URL node n JWT secret, and these are being used. And these are, for example, being used here as database URL. We have specified outload entities and synchronized true, and then we are importing like our other modules, so our user module, our authentication module, and our chat module. We have our app controller and our app service. And we also apply our authentication middleware. So we this middleware, we can check it here. What it does is this basically makes sure if the user is authorized. So we get like the authorization from the request and we verify the JWT. And then we get from our user service the user, if it existed, and if there's a user, then everything is okay and we can call next. And if not, we throw like an HTTP exception that the user is unauthorized. So with this we always make sure. And in our app module, you can also see that we are just excluding two paths from this. So the API uses. This is, I think, the register route, and the login. This is the login route because these are like the public routes, the two, but don't need like a JWT secured or to be JWT secured. And for all other routes, we apply this middleware. In our app controller, this is like just the basic get hello to make sure that everything works. We can also remove this in a later video. First, we can go now to our authentication module. So this handles the JWT stuff. Here we are using the JWT module from nest.js. We are importing the config module and the config service so that we have access to our secret. So for example, the JWT secret. And we always sign this at the moment with expires in 10,000 seconds. And here we have our providers, our service, the JWT strategy, our guard, and so on. So as strategy, we are using the passport strategy. We get the JWT from the requests. We are not ignoring the expiration, and our secret is from our config service, our JWT secret that we get. And we can also validate it, and then we return our user. Our guard, we have just our JWT guard that we want to use. And in our authentication service, we have just the basic stuff that we need for our JWT. So JWT service is coming from the nestjs JWT service and is configured like here. And then we can use the basic stuff, for example, to generate a JWT. So we signed async with our user. We can hash a password with decrypt. We can compare passwords. So for example, for the login, we can check if the stored password hash in the database is correct against the password that was entered by the user in the login form. And we can also verify that the JWT is valid, so that we check it against the stuff here. Then next we have our user module. So this is maybe a little bit simpler than our chat module, where we have just our type-orm module for our user entity, so that we can use everything from type-orm. For example, let's go to our service, like the repository from type-orm to have easy access to our database. So we can go to our models. We have like some interfaces. So like in response, we get like the access token, the token type expires in. We have a user interface and we have a user entity. And this is also the entity from type-orm, that is here with these annotations. We have like a primary generated column for ID, We have a column for username, for email, and we can also set properties like unique or select and so on. So we never want to select the password if we don't specify it. We have a many-to-many relationship to our rooms, so a user can have many rooms and each room can have many users. We have a one-to-many relationship to connected users, and we have a one-to-many relationship to joined rooms, and also a one-to-many to message entity. And before insert or update, we always want to make the email and the username lowercase. So we come later to the chat. And now first finish our user module. We have our user controller. That is where we have injected our user service and the user helper service. So our user helper service, let's have a quick look in it. So this is where just to create an DTO or create an entity from a DTO. So we get a user DTO, and then we are returning a user interface with email, username, password, and the same goes for the user. But also reflect this in the next videos or versions of the project. Then we have here for our controller / users. We have a post request. This is like the creation. So here we first have a user entity, and then we are saving this user entity in our database. So first we check if our user already exists or if the email exists. If this is like the case, we throw like an HTTP exception, and if not, then we first hash the password. So hash password is here, so we use our authentication service to hash the password. Also simplify this later. Then we override from our user the password with the password hash, and then we save this user to our user repository from type ORM into our database, and then we return the user. So we are using this find one because then the password is not being returned with it, and we don't have to exclude it from our response. So this would be like our first walkthrough, and then when we go to our controller, we not just have our create, but we also have our login. Here we have our body from the request, which is our user DTO. So we first create our user entity, and then we log in, and if everything is correct, we return like an object with access token, token type, and expires in. And in our login function, we are first trying to find the user by email. If we found him, then we check if the password matches. So this is basically again our authentication service to compare the password and the password hash that we stored in the database. And if this was correct, then we generate our JWT with our authentication service and return this. And if something here is wrong, then we throw like the HTTP exception, either user or login was not successful or user not found, for example, if the email is not existing. And there are two more requests. So we have one to find all. So this is like a query that is paginated. So the default here is like the first page and limit to 10. And this returns like a pagination object. And here we check if the limit that is specified is over 100. If it's specified, then we set it to 100. Otherwise, we use the limit. And then we make against our user service to find all, and here we use simply the paginate from the nestjs-typeorm-paginate package to make a paginated request against our database and to return the users. We also have a get request to find a user by username. this is being used, for example, when we are adding in our front end. So we can have a look at it here. And we are creating a new room. And we want to add a username. For example, we want to add Thomas. Then in our network, we have here, I type it in, Thomas. Then we have here find user by username. And as a response, we get our all the objects that are matching. So here, this is just the Thomas user. So ID1, username Thomas, and email. And then we can add it here and add the user. So here we have query parameter. You can see it also here. That here the query parameter is username with Tom, whatever I typed here. Yeah, and then we are going against the user service, find all, and are making the user repository.find, and it's like a where clause where we are searching for the username, like anything here and anything in the end, and the username to lowercase, since we are storing, like you remember in our user entity, we always have the email and the username stored in lowercase. So we also have to search against it in lowercase, and then we return the found user or users. So this is basically our users. And now we are coming to our heart. This is our chat module, and here we have our typeorm module, the room entity, connected user entity, message and joint room entities, our gateway, our services, and also our user module and our application module, since we are using them here also. So first we have our chat gateway, and here we are doing some stuff. So first we are setting up like a WebSocket server. And this has some origin, so I think this here can be removed later. But we have here localhost 3000 and 4200. And we are also implementing on gateway connection. So when we are, the user is connecting, the user is disconnecting, and when we are implementing like a module, then we are doing some stuff. So if the module is init, then we remove all the connected users and all the joint room services. So basically, to make this a little bit clearer here, in the model, we have a connected user. This is like also like in the database a table where we are storing all the users that are at the moment connected. And you can see it here. This has a many-to-one relationship to the users. Then we have our joint rooms. So these are all where a user at the moment is joined to a room. And this is connected to the user entity and to the room entity, so that we always know at the moment, for example, user A joined room A. Then we have like a message entity, and the message like always belongs to a room and always belongs to a user. So these are both many-to-one because the user can have like many messages, and the same goes with room. Like a room can also have many messages, but each message can just have one room and one user. And we also make like a default created and update every time stamps or dates. Then we have at last our room entity. So here we have like all our users, so that we have in our user module that are like added when we create the room. Then we have like all our joint room entities and all our messages. Like here the connection, and then we can go again to our gateway. So, and here we are subscribing or we have implement some stuff. So first on module init, like we delete all the connected and joined rooms on our database. Here you can see we are just simply delete everything in this table in the database, because we don't want to have anything stored there when we init it. So when we handle like a connection, then first we get like our decoded JWT token from our handshake. And then we always have our user, so that we always know, okay, which user is like doing some stuff here. So if the user is not existing, then we immediately disconnect the users. This is like just a little safety feature. But if everything works correctly, so we have our user and we set from our socket the data user to our user that we are having here, that we always have it. Then we get all the rooms for this user. So this is like a paginate request against our room service, where we have like a query where we join the users with room.users and select them. And then we add like as metadata our current page. And since in Angular material, we have to make it -1, because like the implementation of the Angular material paginator and the paginator here in nest.js is like a little bit different. So we always have to make it -1, because I think one starts at 1 and the other at 0. So we have to match this. And then, since the user like joined, we want to save this in our connected user service. So we save the socket ID and the user, so that we can later, we always know, okay, this user is online. If we want to push some data to this user, we have to use this socket ID. So you can see it here in our connected user service. We save the connected user, and this is our socket ID and the user. And then, when we save this, we emit our rooms to this specific connected client. So all his rooms that he joined to, then we send to this with our server, WebSocket server, we send to our socket ID from the user here. You see it here, this is the socket ID, so that we can always know how to reach this user. And we emit like our rooms event. So where the clients over Angular, so the socket.io Angular client is listening to the rooms event, and then it knows, and it gets like the paginated rooms here. We have like handle disconnect. So if you leave, then we just want to remove our connection that we stored in our database from the connected user service. We want to delete it, so we delete it by socket ID, and we provide the socket ID and just delete this here. We have a disconnect, so if the user is disconnecting, we also throw an error unauthorized, and so we are using this here, for example, for disconnect. Then we have here like subscribe message. If in Angular, our client is like emitting like the message create room. Then like first our middleware checks if everything is correct with JWT, and then we have here our socket and the room that should be created. And then we first create this room with our room service, where we create, first we add like the user that created the room. You can see it here, that we specify the room, and from our socket, from the data.user that we set here. So we set here on the connection. So when the user first connects, we added here, where is it? To our socket, the user, data.user. And here we have then our socket data.user, and then we want to save this to our room service. Then this room here should be created. Then first we add the creator to the room, so the user that created the room, My PC is a little bit slow, so we see it here. We just push the creator to our users from the room, so to the array, and then we just save the room into our database. And then for each user in this room, so we loop over the users, we search in our connected user service, so for the users that are connected at the moment with our gateway, we search with the user. So this is simply find by the user. And then we get all the rooms for this specific user that we look over and want to have like the first page. So since this is, I think, yeah, you can see it here. We ordered it by updated at descending, so the new room should always be at the top. And yeah, here we have to again subtract the page to match the Angular paginator. And then for each connection of this user, so for example, if he's logged in with 2 browsers, then we also want to send this to both connections of them. We want to send this with our WebSocket server to the specific socket ID from our to the specific ID of the connections. And the connections are we are getting from our connected user service, where we search by user. It's also an array. It could be multiple, like I said. Maybe he's with 2 browsers or with a smartphone, whatever, connected. Then we want to send this to each of his connections and send all the rooms. So with the first page here. Then we have another subscription for a subscribe message for paginated rooms. For example, if a user in the front end wants to paginate, let's go back to the dashboard. They want to paginate here, so if I have more than 10 rooms, I can paginate, and then I will send a request page that I want to have, and then our room service is having our user ID and is handling the incoming page request, and then we're just having like a query where we paginate here with the pagination options, and these are just like the page and how many rooms you want to see. So it could also be 20 and not just 10. Then we subtract again to match the Angular paginator, and then we emit the rooms to this specific socket. Then we have another subscribe message for join room. So for example, if someone goes into a room, and then what I want to see is if I join a room, I want to have all like the messages. So if I join this room here, then I want to see like all the messages here. And we can't see it here since this is like WebSockets. So maybe we can see it here. So you can see it here first. We establish the stuff, and then we have here our rooms pagination with all the room items. With the description, the users, metadata, and so on. And if I select, then we have here join room. So here the join room message, and then we get a response like the room, the users, and so on. And another one would then be like the messages that we get. So when we go here, we have our find messages for room. So when we join a room, we want first to display all the messages. So we are searching for the room. And for the first page, we're limited to 10 messages in our service. So this is like a simple query here, where we query for like the messages. We join with the room ID here in this case, and we order them by create at descending so that we have like the latest messages. And then we make like the pagination request against our repository. So when we have the join room, then like we said, here we have again because because of the Angular paginator, distract 1. And then we want to save the connection to our room. So here we have our joined room service where we want to save which users are joined at the moment in our room. So we save the socket ID, the user and the room in our service. So we just save it here. And then we want also to, here, first we got like the last messages. We emit these to the specific socket that the user connected to this room. So we send him the last messages. Then we have another subscription for leave room. So if I leave a room and connect to another, then our Angular emits like a leave room message. And here we just then remove this joined room connection from our database. So we just delete this. Then we have our add message. So this is basically if we want to type a message to a chat room in our front end. Then we have our socket and our message. So first we create this message in our message service, and we are saying to which user. We add and we get the room also, and then we also get all the joined users that are at the moment in this room online, because we want to send like a message to all users of this room that are currently online. So like we showed here, like before, send something here, then it immediately displays here. So we send it to all, so we loop over the joined users at the moment and send to each of them the message. So the created message, and then this gets added at the bottom. So this is basically our gateway, our model, and we have now gone also through all our services. So this is basically it. So let's take a quick look at the next steps. So that could follow in the next videos or in the next release versions of this project. So first, of course, fix multiple bugs. So there are always some stuff going wrong. Then another feature could be that we also can add users when the chat room is created, or that we can remove users. We could add like infinite scrolling for rooms and for messages, and not the simple pagination that we have at the moment. We could implement a front-end store if we want to. We can refactor the styling and make it maybe also more responsive. We could display a list of the users that are online currently, or we could also, at the moment just the messages are like fetched with socket.io, I think. So if there's like a new room, you need to press like F5 or make a request again. So we could also add this.